The Velarath had been drawing maps of the universe for longer than most civilizations had been breathing. Not metaphorical maps. Not star charts printed on paper or stored in digital files. The Velarath drew maps the way humans dream, with their entire nervous system engaged, their six-limbed bodies pressed flat against crystalline memory slabs, their consciousness bleeding outward into the fabric of space like ink dropped into still water. Every gravitational pull, every radiation signature, every living world and dead moon, they felt it all, absorbed it all, recorded it all into slabs that could outlast the heat death of a sun. They had been doing this for 412,000 years. Their maps covered 117 galaxies. They had catalogued 842 intelligent species. And then, roughly 300 years ago by the Velarath's own counting system, which measured time in something loosely translated as deep breaths of space, they stopped mapping one specific region of one specific spiral galaxy. Not because they ran out of time. Not because their technology failed. Not because the region was unmappable. They stopped because something looked back. The first human to officially make contact with an interstellar civilization was not a diplomat. She was not a soldier, a scientist, or a philosopher selected by committee after decades of careful consideration. Her name was Dana Marsh, and she was a long-haul cargo pilot who repaired her own ship with salvaged parts and ran legal gray supply routes between the outer asteroid colonies and the mid-belt stations. She was 34 years old. She had a scar across her left jawline from a decompression accident when she was 22. She kept a small, cracked photograph of her daughter taped to the inside of her helmet. Not her visor, her helmet, on the inside where she could see it during suited repairs when the rest of the universe had temporarily ceased to matter. Dana had no idea she was about to become the most important human being who had ever lived. She found the Velarath ship purely by accident. She had been following a ghost signal, a faint rhythmic pulse that her scanner kept flagging as a debris field but didn't match any debris field signature she'd memorized in 17 years of outer belt flying. The pulse had a pattern. Debris didn't pattern. Dana had learned that lesson the hard way when she was 26 and chased what she thought was a derelict or hauler for 6 hours only to find it was a collapsed relay satellite spinning in a perfectly misleading rotation. This was different. This pulse breathed. Not mechanically. Not in the clean, even intervals of a machine. It breathed the way a sleeping person breathes, with small variations, slight hesitations, the barely perceptible rhythm of something alive and unconscious. Dana Marsh followed it for 3 hours before her proximity alarm screamed. The ship was enormous. Not in the way that human ships were enormous, which was to say large in terms of function, built to scale with the tonnage they needed to carry and the distance they needed to cover. The Velarath vessel was enormous the way a mountain range is enormous. Not because it was built to be that size, but because size was simply what it had become over time. It looked less like a constructed object and more like a geological event. Its surface was layered and ridged, dark as cooled volcanic rock in some places, translucent and faintly luminous in others, as though something moved just beneath the hull like blood beneath skin. Dana cut her engines to minimal thrust and floated. She had no protocol for this. No one did. Humanity had been broadcasting radio signals into space for over a century and had received nothing but silence and the occasional misinterpreted natural phenomenon. The general scientific consensus, updated as recently as 18 years ago, was that humanity was most likely functionally alone in any practically reachable region of space. There might be microbial life somewhere. There might be ruins of extinct civilizations. But active, intelligent, spacefaring life? The probability models were not optimistic. Dana looked at the mountain range ship floating 30 kilometers off her bow and said, very quietly to no one in particular, well, somebody was wrong. She sat with that for about 40 seconds. Then she opened a broad-frequency transmission channel and said, "This is independent cargo pilot Dana Marsh, registry number CM7714, operating out of the mid-belt stations. I'm not armed in any meaningful way. I don't represent any government. I'm just a person who noticed your signal and wanted to make sure nobody was in trouble. If you can understand me, or if you ever figure out how to understand me, I hope you're doing okay." She closed the channel. Waited. The ship pulsed once. A single deep breath and went still. Dana sat in the silence of her cockpit, looking at the photograph of her daughter inside her helmet, and decided she was going to stay until something happened. She had 6 days of food and water. A broken secondary heating coil she'd been meaning to fix. A cargo hold full of polymer sheeting bound for Station 11. She stayed. On the 4th day they opened a door. The Velarath had a word, Velocira, that had no clean translation into any of the 842 languages they'd catalogued. The closest approximation in human English would be something like, the specific dread of recognizing something ancient in something new. It was not quite fear. It was not quite awe. It sat precisely between them like a stone in a river that the water had to split itself around. They felt Velocira the moment Dana Marsh's transmission reached their hull. Not because of the words. They didn't understand the words yet. The Velarath language translation process was not instantaneous. It required what they called resonance mapping, which involved absorbing a speaker's vocal patterns, physiological responses, ambient neural signals, and the electromagnetic microvariations produced by the body during speech, then cross-referencing all of that simultaneously against their 400,000-year archive of catalogued communication structures. It took time. For a truly unknown language it could take days. No. They felt Velocira because of the silence before the words. Dana Marsh had spent 40 seconds in total quiet before she transmitted. 40 seconds doesn't sound significant. But in the Velarath's experience of first contact scenarios, and they had catalogued over 200 of them, either directly or through the records of allied civilizations, no species waited. Every species transmitted immediately upon detection. Fear or excitement or aggression or desperation, these things always rushed to fill silence. The silence itself was always the first casualty of contact. Dana Marsh sat in silence for 40 seconds and did nothing. The Velarath crew member monitoring the external sensors, a young mapper named OSS, who was only 60,000 years into her training and was considered something like a junior apprentice by Velarath standards, felt the 40 seconds land in her chest like a dropped stone. She reported it immediately to the elder cartographers. There were 7 elder cartographers aboard the vessel. They were not rulers exactly. The Velarath didn't organize themselves by authority in any way humans would recognize. The elders were simply the ones who had been mapping the longest, who had absorbed the most, whose consciousness had expanded outward so many times that they carried something approximating cosmic memory, not of events but of patterns. The shape of how things went. The texture of recurring truths. The eldest of them was named, in translation, something like holds the first breath. She had been mapping for 380,000 years. She was the one who had originally charted the region of the Milky Way now formally designated in Velarath records as Vel North, meaning, roughly, the territory we do not enter. Earth's solar system sat at the center of Vel North. Holds the first breath had not spoken aloud in 11 years. She communicated through pattern, subtle adjustments to the bioluminescent nodes along her 6 limbs, combined with microvibrations in the memory slabs she was always touching. The other elders translated her meaning from long practice. When Oasis brought her the report of the 40-second silence, Holds the first breath stopped moving entirely. Every light on her body went dark. That had never happened before. Not once in 380,000 years. The Velarath were not afraid of humans because humans were dangerous in any conventional sense. Humans were, by almost every observable metric, a fragile, short-lived, technologically primitive species that had barely achieved basic spaceflight and hadn't yet made it out of their own solar system in any meaningful number. In the context of the galactic community, they were what you might call newly germinated, not even close to the full expression of what they might eventually become. The fear was not about capability. The fear was about something the Velarath had seen in their maps. 300 years ago, when they had first turned their consciousness toward Earth's solar system for routine cataloging, they had encountered something that didn't fit. Not a physical object. Not a signal. Not a radiation anomaly. What they encountered was a gap, a place in the pattern of space itself where the resonance was wrong. Where the predictive modeling that had served them perfectly for 400,000 years suddenly, simply, stopped working. Every Velarath mapper who tried to read that region came back with the same description. Something is in the space between things, and it has already noticed me noticing it. Not a creature. Not an entity in any standard sense. Just a presence in the gaps. In the silence between matter. In the pause between one thing and another. It felt, and the Velarath elders had argued about this word for decades, it felt patient. Holds the first breath had circulated a formal record among the elders 3 centuries ago. The record said, "We have found a world. The world has residents who are unremarkable. But the world is attended by something that preceded the world. It does not originate from the residents. But it appears to have chosen them. We should not disturb this situation until we understand it. And we may never understand it." The region was marked Vel North. No Velarath vessel had approached it since. Until the ship that Dana Marsh found, which was here not by assignment, but because young Oasis, who was reckless in the way that only the young and curious can be, had filed a false route and diverted their mapping expedition here without telling the elders. OSS was, in the Velarath equivalent of a very great deal of trouble. But now the trouble was sitting 30 kilometers off their bow in a small, battered ship, and it had waited 40 seconds in silence, and it had wished them well in a language they were currently decoding, and holds the first breath had gone dark for the first time in anyone's memory. And then on the fourth day they opened a door. The door was not a door in any sense Dana's eyes could immediately process. One moment there was Hull, that dark, ridged geological surface floating in the black. The next moment, there was a space in the hull that had not been there before. It didn't open like an airlock. It didn't slide or rotate or retract. It simply became. The way a thought becomes present in your mind, not arriving from somewhere, just suddenly existing where it hadn't a moment before. Dana stared at it for a long time. She thought about her daughter. Her daughter's name was Callie, and she was 11 years old, and she lived with Dana's sister in a habitat module on the inner belt, and she was learning to play guitar badly and enthusiastically, which Dana considered one of the finest things a person could do. Dana thought, if I go through that door, Callie might never know what happened to me. There would be no body to find. No final transmission to decode. Just a cargo pilot who followed a strange signal and vanished. She thought about that very carefully. Then she suited up, checked her oxygen, tucked the photograph of Callie securely into the inside of her helmet, and went through the door. The inside of the Velarath vessel was nothing like the outside. The outside was stone and darkness and geological pressure. The inside was light. Not the artificial white light of a human station. Something warmer, more complex, as though the light itself had texture. It came from everywhere and cast no shadows, which Dana's brain kept tripping over because shadows were how human eyes understood space and depth, and without them the interior kept refusing to resolve into a legible room. It was large. Very large. The ceiling was so far above her that she couldn't see it clearly. The floor was not floor exactly. It was the memory slab material she'd later learn was called Velta, the crystalline substance the Velarath used for mapping. It ran wall to wall, and when Dana took her first step onto it, she felt a vibration travel up through her boot and into her leg, faint and rhythmic like a pulse. She stopped. The pulse synced with her heartbeat. She stood very still and let it do that because it didn't feel threatening. It felt like something paying attention. "Hello," she said, though she knew they couldn't understand her yet. 3 Velarath entered from a far corridor. Dana's first sight of them stopped her breathing for about 2 seconds. They were tall, 2.5 meters at least, and they moved on 4 limbs when they moved quickly, dropping from an upright 2-limbed posture to a horizontal 4-limbed run with the fluid ease of something that had never had to choose between those configurations. Their skin, if that's what it was the same dark, ridged material as the exterior hull in some places, and translucent in others. She could see something moving inside them, slow and luminous, like the light she'd seen beneath the hull. Their faces were, not wrong exactly, but organized differently. 4 eyes arranged in a slight arc rather than forward-facing. No visible nose. A wide mouth that didn't open to speak. Instead, the bioluminescent nodes along their limbs flickered in patterns when they communicated. The one in front was smaller than the other 2. Young Dana would later learn. This was OSS. OSS stopped about 4 meters from Dana and went very still. They looked at each other. Then OSS did something none of the elders had expected or planned for. She extended one of her upper limbs, slowly, clearly, deliberately, clearly meant to be read as a gesture rather than an action, and opened the flat, wide appendage at the end of it. It wasn't a hand. It had too many joints, too many points of articulation. But it was open. Offered. Dana looked at it for a moment. Then she pulled off her glove, reached out, and pressed her bare palm against OSS's open limb. The Velta floor pulsed. Every light in the chamber shifted color. Somewhere deep in the ship, in a chamber the elders had not entered in 3 centuries, something that lived in the space between things felt the contact happen. And it sighed. The Velarath translation process took 31 hours. Dana spent those hours in a chamber they prepared for her. They were clearly good at rapid biological assessment, because the temperature, atmospheric composition, and pressure were all within comfortable human range within minutes of her arrival, adjusted with a quiet efficiency that Dana found more impressive than anything else she'd seen. The light was warm. There was a surface she could lie on. They brought her something to drink that turned out to be water, which surprised her until she realized they had probably been monitoring her biology since she first entered the ship and understood what she needed. She slept for 11 of those hours. Dreamlessly, which was unusual for her. Dana normally dreamed about the decompression accident, The hiss of escaping air, the cold so immediate it felt like being slapped by something enormous. She dreamed about it for 12 years. That night, or what passed for night in a Velarath vessel, she didn't dream at all. She woke up feeling strangely rested. OSS was sitting near the entrance to the chamber when Dana woke. Just sitting. Not doing anything. Not monitoring equipment or performing tasks. Just present, in the patient way Dana was starting to associate with everything about this species. "Good morning," Dana said, mostly out of habit. OSS's limb nodes flickered. A sound emerged from somewhere, not from OSS's body, but from the Velta floor beneath them. A vibration that resolved, over about 4 seconds, into something that wasn't quite speech but wasn't quite not speech either. It was as though the ship itself were attempting language. It said, "Awareness of returning light." Dana blinked. Are you translating good morning? The floor, the concept unit morning belongs to a rotation of a specific body. We have no specific body. The translation preserves intent over mechanism. Dana sat up slowly. You translate concepts, not words. Words are local. Concepts travel. That is, Dana said quietly, a very good philosophy. The floor was silent for a moment. Then, philosophy. Your species has a word that means, the practice of asking questions one cannot answer, for the purpose of understanding how the question works. We have no equivalent word. We have the practice but we did not name it. We simply called it breathing. Dana laughed. It was a small, surprised laugh, not performed for anyone's benefit. The Velta pulsed warmly. On the second day of conversation, Dana asked the question she'd been holding carefully since she first saw the ship. "Why did you stay away from us?" she said. "From Earth. From our whole system." The translation pause was longer than usual. Then, there are 843 intelligent species known to our archive. 842 of them exist as their own primary condition. They are what they are, and the space around them is what the space is. Dana waited. Your world is the 843rd. You are what you are. But the space around you is not simply space. Something occupies it that our archive has no classification for. It is not alive in a biological sense. It does not communicate in any format we have decoded in 400,000 years. But it is present and it is attending. Attending, Dana repeated. Like watching. Watching implies a watcher separate from the watched. This is not that. The word your archive provides that comes closest is accompanying. Dana was quiet for a while. And that scared you, she said. The archive does not register fear as a primary state. We register unclassifiable phenomena as velocira. The ship offered a translation, the dread awe of recognizing something ancient in something new. Dana turned that over carefully. You recognized it? The thing around us. You'd seen it before? The longest pause yet. Then, not seen. Remembered? The archive holds impressions from before our mapping began. Before our civilization formed. Biological memory, passed through generations so ancient they predate our language. And in that biological memory there is a shape. A pattern. Something that existed before the first Velarath drew a breath. Something we have no record of encountering, and yet knew instantly when we felt it. Dana thought about this. You're afraid of something you remember but have never met. We are not afraid of it. We are afraid of disturbing it. There is a difference. And it lives around Earth. It does not live anywhere. It attends Earth. That is not the same as living there. Why Earth? Dana asked. Why us? The floor vibrated in a way that didn't translate into words. The closest Dana could interpret it was, we have been asking that question for 300 years and we have no answer, and this is the most unsettling thing in our 400,000-year archive. Dana sent a transmission to her daughter on the 5th day. She wasn't sure it would reach her. They were well outside normal relay range, but the Velarath had, with quiet generosity, boosted her signal through their own communication infrastructure. Dana hadn't asked. They'd just done it. Like the water. Like the adjusted atmosphere. They paid attention and then they acted on what they noticed, without announcement or expectation of acknowledgement. Dana was starting to think that was a kind of wisdom she'd never had a word for before. The transmission was simple. She didn't tell Callie where she was or what she'd found. She didn't know what to say about that yet, or whether saying it was safe, or whether Callie would believe her. She just said, "Hey Bug. I'm okay. I'm somewhere really different and I found something I want to tell you about when I get home. Keep practicing guitar even though it sounds like a cat falling downstairs right now. I love you a lot. More than space, which is saying something because space is extremely large. She sent it. Then she sat with her back against the Velta wall and thought. OSS was as had become normal nearby. Dana had come to understand that OSS's presence near her wasn't supervision or guarding. It was curiosity. OSS was, by Velarath standards, a very young person who had done an extremely inadvisable thing out of an extremely strong desire to understand something. Dana could relate to that in a way that made her feel warmer toward OSS than she might have otherwise. She had been that person. She was still, probably, that person. "Can I ask you something?" Dana said. OSS's nodes flickered. The floor translated, "You have been asking things for 5 days. This pattern will presumably continue." Dana smiled. "Fair. Okay. The thing you described, the presence around Earth, around our system. Your elders clearly believe it's real. But you," she paused. "You're the one who came here even though you weren't supposed to. So what do you think it is?" OSS was quiet for longer than usual. Then, "I think your archive might contain information ours does not." Dana frowned. "Our archive? You mean like, our history? Our science?" "Not science. Not history in the formal sense. The deep record. The things your species carries in its oldest layers, the stories that predate your civilization. The things you drew on walls before you had cities. The patterns you repeated across disconnected cultures that never communicated with each other." Dana stared at her. "You've been studying us. We have been observing from distance for 300 years. We did not approach. We did not communicate. But we mapped what was mappable, your electromagnetic output, your cultural broadcasts, the patterns of what you chose to transmit into the open sky. And every human culture, across every continent, across every era, has images of the same thing." Dana waited. "Not a creature. Not a person. A shape. An impression. Humans draw it in different ways. Sometimes it is a figure, sometimes a light, sometimes simply a feeling expressed as an image. But the shape is the same. And it matches, not exactly but closely enough to cause Velocira, it matches the impression in our own biological memory. The one our species carries from before our history began." Dana's hands were very still. "What shape?" she asked. OSS moved to the wall and placed a limb flat against the Velta surface. The translucent material lit up beneath her touch, and a shape appeared, rendered in the soft, complex light the Velarath used for everything. It was not a dramatic shape. It was not a monster or a god or anything that science fiction had ever proposed as the face of something cosmic and ancient. It was the shape of an open hand. Not Velarath. Not human. Something that had hands before hands were a thing. Dana thought about Callie. About the drawings on her daughter's bedroom wall, drawings Callie had been making since she was 3 years old and that Dana had always found both beautiful and slightly unplaceable. Not quite animals. Not quite people. Things with open hands. She had always assumed it was just how kids drew. Holds the first breath requested Dana's presence on the 7th day. Dana had not yet been brought before the elder cartographers. OSS had explained, through the ship's translation, that the elders were in disagreement about what was happening and that bringing Dana into their presence before consensus was reached would be, by Velarath cultural standards, an act of considerable disrespect toward Dana rather than toward the elders, because it would mean presenting her with a situation that had not yet resolved itself into something coherent, and to the Velarath, presenting a guest with unresolved chaos was the deepest form of rudeness. Dana had found that genuinely funny, because in her experience, most human institutions presented guests with unresolved chaos as a matter of course and called it normal. The chamber where the elders gathered was the deepest part of the ship. The Velta here was different. Older, darker, more layered, like sedimentary rock rather than crystal. Dana could feel it through her boots the moment she stepped into the corridor leading toward it. Not just the pulse she'd felt since her first step aboard. Something older beneath the pulse. Like the pulse was a surface rhythm and underneath it was something that had been running since before the ship was built. The 7 elders were in a circle when she entered. They were more still than she'd expected. In her time with OSS, there had been constant subtle motion. The flickering nodes, the shift of weight between limbs, the small unconscious movements of any living body. The elders barely moved at all. They were like the deep Velta floor itself, present and patient and very, very old. Holds, the first breath was at the point of the circle closest to Dana. Her lights were on. Faint and slow, like the last light before dark, but present. She regarded Dana with all 4 eyes for a long moment. Then she touched the floor and the ship spoke. "I drew your solar system 312 years ago," it said in Holds the first breath's voice rendered through the translation. "I was mapping the outer arm of this galaxy, a routine expansion of the archive. I was not expecting anything unusual. In 400,000 years of mapping, I have found many things. I have found worlds of extraordinary beauty and worlds of catastrophic violence. I have found species at every stage of their development. I have found ruins that would take another 400,000 years to understand. But I had never found anything that found me back. Dana waited. When I reached your solar system, I placed my consciousness into the resonance as I have done billions of times. And something touched it. Not aggressively. Not intrusively. The way one places a hand on the shoulder of someone who appears to be lost. Gently. With something that felt, and I have spent 300 years questioning this impression, that felt like recognition. It recognized you, Dana said. It recognized something in me. Something I did not know was there to be recognized. And then, and this is the detail I have never shared with the full council until this moment, it showed me something. The entire chamber dimmed. It showed me a map. The Velta floor blazed with light and the map appeared. Dana looked at it. It was not a map of space. It was a map of something she didn't have a word for, a map of something like time, but not time as physics defined it. More like the shape of how things were going. The pattern of what was becoming. Hundreds of civilizations rendered as lines, trajectories, some long and graceful and some short and violent and some curved back on themselves in ways that didn't make geometric sense. Earth was on the map. It was not rendered as a line. It was rendered as a knot. What does the knot mean? Dana asked. Holds the first breath's response took a long time to arrive. We have 12 words in our language for the different kinds of significance something can carry. A sun is significant in one way, necessary, central but replaceable in the larger pattern. A species is significant in another way, rare, unique but finite. A concept is significant in a third way, it transcends the species that originated it and moves outward into other minds, other cultures and changes them. And so on. Earth is significant in the 12th way. Dana had a feeling she didn't particularly want to ask the next question. What is the 12th way? The 12th word translates as, the thing without which the pattern cannot complete itself. Not important in the sense of power or influence. Important in the sense that, a lock is important to a key. Not because the lock is stronger. Not because the lock does anything remarkable. But because the key without the lock, is not yet what it fully is. You're saying Earth is a lock. We are saying the thing attending Earth may be a key. Dana stared at the map. At the knot that was Earth. At the lines of 800 other civilizations moving through their trajectories around it. And none of those other civilizations know this, she said. The galactic community does not speak of Earth. The galactic community agrees by consensus that no one formally enacted, because no one needed to, because the impulse arose simultaneously in every civilization that became aware of the situation, that Earth is to be avoided. Left to its own course. Not interfered with. Why? Because the thing attending it asked. Dana felt the hairs on her arms stand up. It communicated with other species? Not in language. The way it asked was the same way it showed me the map. Not words. Impressions. Knowings. Every species that approached Earth's system at whatever point in their development received the same impression. This is not ready yet. Wait. Not ready, Dana repeated. What does that, what are we not ready for? We do not know. The impression did not explain. It said only wait. OSS, who had been standing to the side, spoke for the first time. Her own notes translated. But 300 years ago when Holds the first breath was shown the map showed something new. Something that had not been on any previous impression any species had received. Dana looked at the map again. At the knot. At the lines around it. She noticed something she hadn't before. Several of the lines, the trajectories of several civilizations, were curving. Slowly, gradually, across what must have been centuries they were bending. Not toward Earth. Not toward any physical location. Toward something more abstract. Toward a point that wasn't on the spatial map at all, but was somehow still there, the way a gravity well is there before you can see it. What is that point? She asked. We do not have a word for it, Holds the first breath said. The closest your language offers based on our archive of your transmissions, is, the moment before something is born. Dana sat down on the Velta floor. She put her hand flat against it the way she'd seen Oasis do, the way she'd seen the elders do. The pulse came up through her palm, steady and slow. Under it, that older thing. That deep, patient rhythm that had been running since before the ship. She sat with it for a while. Then she said, the map that Holds the first breath was shown. The one the presence showed her. Where is Earth on that map in relation to that point? The chamber was silent. Earth, Oasis said finally, is the point. Dana had a habit she'd never analyzed. When she was stressed, not actively dealing with a problem stressed, but the background kind, the kind that lived in the chest and had no specific object, she put her hand flat on the nearest surface. Any surface. The console of her ship, the wall of a station corridor, the floor of wherever she was sleeping. Just flat palm, steady contact. Her sister had teased her about it since they were children. You touch everything like you're checking if it's real, her sister had said once. Dana had laughed and said that was probably true. She was doing it now, palm flat on the Velta floor, and she was thinking about a thing she hadn't thought about in years. A memory from when she was 7 years old. She'd been sick, some ordinary childhood illness, fever and aching, and she'd woken up in the middle of the night in that specific, frightening way children wake from fever dreams, not knowing what was real and what wasn't, the dark room full of shapes that didn't resolve. She'd been scared in the immediate, total way that 7-year-olds are scared. And then something had happened that she'd filed away as a half-dream and never revisited. The dark had changed. Not in any visible way. The room was still dark, the shapes were still shapes. But the texture of the air had changed, had become, very suddenly, full. The way a room feels different when another person is in it, even if you can't see them. Something present. And the fear had simply stopped. Not because anything threatening had been resolved. Not because a light turned on or a parent arrived. The fear had stopped because something had come and sat beside it, patient and old and enormous in a way that had nothing to do with physical size, and the fear had looked at that and simply decided it was not the largest thing in the room anymore. Dana had fallen back asleep and dreamed of open hands. She had been 7 years old. She told this to OSS. OSS was quiet for a long time. Then, we have collected, from your cultural broadcasts, thousands of similar accounts. Across every culture, every era, every demographic your species has. People who describe a moment, often during crisis, illness, grief, extreme isolation, when something present arrives. Not intervention. Not rescue. Just presence. Accompaniment. And it always stops the fear? Not always. Your archive contains accounts where the arrival of the presence made the fear larger, not smaller. But when we cross-reference those accounts, they share a common element. What element? The person reporting them was in the process of harming another person when the presence arrived. Dana thought about that for a long moment. It's not neutral, she said. It is not interested in being neutral. It has a position. A preference. It prefers some things over other things. It did not design you, we believe. It did not create you. But it has been with you since before your species had language, and it has been present at enough of your decisions that it has, we believe, been slowly shaping what you consider instinctive. What we consider instinctive, Dana repeated slowly. Like what? The instinct to check on someone who is suffering, even when you have no obligation to them and no benefit from doing so. The instinct to feel something when a stranger cries. The instinct to feel that abandoning someone in need is wrong, in a way that feels older than any rule. Your species has these instincts more strongly than any other species in our archive. Consistently. Across all cultures. These are not universal traits among intelligent species. Most species we have cataloged do not have them at all, or have them in much weaker form. Dana was very quiet. You're saying something taught us that, she said. We are saying something accompanied you while you learned it. There is a difference. A teacher instructs. What accompanied you simply was present. The way a river doesn't teach the stone to become smooth. It is simply there moving for long enough. Dana looked down at her hand on the floor. The pulse ran up through her palm. Steady. Patient. How long has it been here? She asked. Our oldest impression puts it before the formation of your sun, OSS said. It was in that region of space before your star ignited. It's been waiting, Dana said. This whole time. Before there was anything to wait with. Yes. For what? OSS's nodes flickered in a way that the ship translated not as words but as a feeling. The feeling was, we don't know yet. But we think it might be this. This conversation. This exact moment. Right now. There was one thing the Velarath archive, 400,000 years of accumulated knowledge, 843 species catalogued, 117 galaxies mapped, could not tell them. What the presence wanted. Not what it had done. Not how it behaved. Not what patterns could be observed in its interactions with human history. All of that, OSS explained, was in the archive in extensive detail, gathered from 300 years of cautious observation. The archive could describe the presence's behavior with enormous precision. But the archive had no framework for motive. Because motive, the elders had concluded, was not a concept the presence operated within. Motive required time in a specific way. A beginning state and an end state and a desire to get from one to the other. The presence didn't appear to have a beginning state that it was trying to leave, or an end state it was trying to reach. It was not going anywhere. It was not pursuing anything. It simply was, in the way that a mountain is, in the way that a deep ocean current is, without agenda or destination. And yet it had preferences. It had the river and stone effect on human instinct. It had shown Holds the first breath a map. It had sent impressions to every approaching civilization. Wait. It had, apparently, been sitting in the space around Earth before Earth existed, for reasons it had never communicated to anything. That's a contradiction, Dana said when OSS explained this. Yes. Something can't have preferences without having goals. By the logical framework of every civilization in our archive, including ours, correct. This is one of the primary reasons it cannot be classified. It violates basic models of agency. Unless, Dana said, the model is wrong. OSS was still. The model of agency. The idea that preferences require goals. That caring about something means you want something to happen. What if, she paused, thinking it through carefully, what if something could simply value? Without wanting anything from what it valued. The way you can love a piece of music without wanting to do anything with it. Without wanting it to change or go somewhere or serve a purpose. You just want it to be what it is. You're just glad it exists. OSS's nodes went through a slow, complex pattern. Then, you are describing something our archive has no record of a civilization achieving. What? Unconditional. We have records of civilizations describing the concept. In philosophy, in religion, in art. Across many species including yours the concept appears. But we have no record of a civilization structurally embodying it. Practicing it as a mode of existence rather than an ideal. Living it completely, without reservation, without the layer of self-interest that even the most philosophically advanced species retain. You think the presence does. We think the presence may be, that concept. Made, present. Not a being that practices unconditional regard. But the actuality of it. The fact that unconditional regard is real and not merely conceptual, given, form. Given location. Given, weight. Dana sat very still. She thought about Callie. About the drawing. About the open hands. She thought about the moment she was 7 years old, sick and afraid, and something enormous and patient had sat down beside her fear and the fear had gotten smaller. Not because it was resolved. Because it was accompanied. So the reason it's here, Dana said slowly. Around Earth. Since before the sun. The reason it picked us, or stayed with us or whatever it did. She stopped. She knew the answer. She'd known it for a few minutes, she realized, and had been circling it because it was the kind of answer that was hard to say out loud without sounding ridiculous. Without sounding like the conclusion of a story rather than a real thing you arrived at in a real room. It didn't pick us because we were special, she said. No. It picked us because we were young. Because we hadn't decided yet who we were going to be. The ship was silent. And, OSS said carefully, because the thing that it is, the unconditional regard, the caring without agenda, is something it wanted, we believed, to see if it could be learned. By something that was not it. By something that came to it from the inside, through experience and pain and time, rather than simply being it by nature. An experiment, Dana said. Not an experiment. Experiments have conditions and controls and conclusions. This has none of those. This is something closer to watching a seed that you found that you did not plant, that simply was there in the soil where you happened to be, and staying with it across geological time, not to see what it grows into, not because you need it to grow but because you are there. And it is there. And you find each other's presence sufficient. Dana put both hands on the Velta floor. The pulse ran up through both palms. And under the pulse, deep, deep under it, in the oldest layer of that old ship, she felt for just a moment something that was not the ship. Something that had been there before the ship. Something that was in the floor of the ship because the floor of the ship was in space, and space was where it lived, and it was present in every piece of matter that had ever been present in the region it attended. It felt, and this was the only word she had, and it felt entirely inadequate and entirely accurate at the same time. Black. The galactic community was not a government. It had no central authority, no binding law, no enforcement mechanism. What it had was something older and more durable than law, It had consensus. 842 civilizations across every variety of biology and culture and philosophy had found over millions of years of interaction that certain behaviors tended toward continuation and certain behaviors tended toward ending, and the ones that wanted to continue had gradually, without coordination or agreement, moved toward a common set of, not rules, understandings. One of those understandings was, Earth is attended. We do not approach. We do not interfere. 300 years of that consensus had held. The Velarath vessel, specifically OSS's unauthorized deviation, had broken it. The elders had been in communication with the wider galactic network since Dana's arrival, and the response was, not anger exactly, but something. Other civilizations are aware that contact has been made, OSS explained on the 10th day. Her nodes carried a pattern Dana had learned to read as something between guilt and defiance. There is concern. What kind of concern? The consensus was maintained for a reason. Not just because the presence asked, but because every civilization that studied the Earth situation from a distance arrived at the same conclusion. Premature contact would disturb something. That the correct unfolding of whatever Earth is moving toward required, the absence of external influence. Dana thought about that. And now I'm here. On your ship. Having had 9 days of conversations with you. Yes. So I'm the disturbance. OSS's response took a long moment. No. We are uncertain you are the disturbance. Because, she paused and the floor carried an unusually complex translation cluster. Because the presence has not responded in any way that suggests disturbance. When holds the first breath first mapped your system and the presence touched her, the impression was, wait. When the Drevathi civilization approached 2,000 years ago, the impression was, wait. When the Karath collective passed through your outer system 800 years ago and sent a probe, the impression that came back was, wait. Every time without variation, wait. And this time, OSS was still. When you walked through our door, she said, the impression that reached the elders, not just holds the first breath. All 7 of them, simultaneously without communication, received it, was not wait. Dana waited. It was, now. The now created. Dana searched for a human word and landed on consternation, among the galactic community. The Velarath relayed the development through their network. Within what translated to about 2 standard days, responses were arriving from 17 other civilizations that maintained monitoring presences in the region. Most of the responses were some variation of confusion and unease. Several were something closer to fear, not of Dana personally but of the implication. Of what now meant. Of the possibility that a thing they had all independently agreed to wait for was arriving. One response was different. It came from a civilization called the Ithori, who were the second oldest spacefaring species in this region of the galaxy, after the Velarath. The Ithori had been observing Earth longer than any other civilization except the Velarath. They were, OSS explained, the most reluctant to endorse the consensus, not because they wanted to interfere, but because they had studied human culture more intensively than anyone else and had arrived at a conclusion that made them, in the Velarath's characterization, anxious on humanity's behalf. The Ithori's response, translated, said, the thing you are calling now is not a beginning. It is a recognition. The presence has determined that something in the human project has reached a state it was waiting for. We have spent 2 million years trying to determine what that state would look like. We believe, based on our study of human cultural output, that we have been wrong about the nature of what was being waited for. We believed, as most civilizations believed, that the presence was waiting for humanity to become something, to reach a developmental threshold, achieve a technological or philosophical milestone, demonstrate readiness for galactic integration. We no longer believe this. We believe the presence was not waiting for humanity to become anything. We believe it was waiting for a human being to stop, to be still. To sit with an unknown thing in silence for 40 seconds instead of immediately filling that silence with noise. Dana read the translation twice. She thought about 40 seconds in a cockpit looking at a mountain range ship, not transmitting. She thought about how it had not been a decision. It had not been strategy or wisdom or discipline. She'd simply felt, in a way she had no explanation for, that the silence was the right thing. That the silence was, in that particular moment, the most honest thing available to her. She put her hand on the Velta floor. The pulse. And under it, warm, patient there, that other thing. No. The elders asked Dana if she would transmit a message to the wider network. Not a diplomatic message. Not a formal introduction of humanity to galactic civilization. Not a statement of human values or capabilities or ambitions. They were not asking her to represent her species. They were asking because the presence, which had not communicated directly, had not spoken, had simply shifted from wait to now, seemed to be indicating, in the way it indicated things, that the voice it wanted carrying through the network in this moment was not an elder, not a diplomat, not a formal representative of anything. It was Dana's. Dana Marsh, cargo pilot, 34, scar on the left jaw, photograph of her daughter inside her helmet, 6 days of food and no political mandate. Dana sat with this for a day. Then she composed a message. It said, "I don't know who you are or how many of you there are or what you look like or how long you've been out there. I'm not going to pretend that I have something important to say because I'm not sure I do. I'm a person who followed a strange signal because it breathed. I found a ship full of people who have been mapping the universe for longer than my civilization has had language. I've learned more in the last 10 days than I can probably hold, and I expect most of it hasn't finished landing yet. Here's what I know. There is something here, around us, around my world, around the space where my world is. Something that has been present for longer than my world has existed. I'm not afraid of it. I want to say that clearly because I think some of you might expect me to be, and I'm not. I've felt it since I was a child, the way I suspect most humans have felt it, without knowing what it was. It feels like being accompanied. It feels like something that is glad you exist, without needing you to be different or better or further along or more advanced. Just glad you exist exactly as you are, in the mess and the incompleteness of it. I don't know what's supposed to happen now. I don't know what now means in the context of something that's been waiting since before my son was born. But I'll tell you what I know about my species, not because it's impressive but because it's true. We are very, very good at being in trouble and not giving up. We're very good at sitting with something broken and finding a way to stay with it until we understand it. We're very good at loving things we can't explain. That might not be the kind of readiness you were expecting. I don't know that it's readiness at all. But I was told that what this moment needed was not a prepared voice, so here is an unprepared one. We exist. We're here. Whatever has been waiting, I'm not sure we knew you were waiting, but I think we felt it. I think it's part of why, even in the worst of us and the worst of our centuries, we kept leaving lights on. Kept transmitting into the silence. Kept asking whether anyone was out there. We weren't asking if there was anyone to help us. We were asking if there was anyone to sit with. That's all. My name is Dana Marsh. I'm a cargo pilot. I have a daughter named Callie who plays guitar badly and enthusiastically, and she has been drawing open hands since she was 3 years old, and I'm starting to understand why. I hope we can talk. I think we have a lot to learn from each other. I expect you've been waiting for this conversation for a very long time. So have we, I think. We just didn't have the words for it yet. She sent it. The network received it. 17 civilizations processed it simultaneously. The Ithori, who had been anxious on humanity's behalf for 2 million years, sent back a single transmission. It said in translation, this. This is what we were waiting to hear. Not the content. The voice. The particular quality of not knowing and still speaking. We have waited 2 million years for a human to transmit into the galactic community not from confidence but from honest uncertainty. Every other species made their first galactic transmission as a declaration. You made yours as a question. That is, and then a word that took the translation system a long time to process. That is, in our oldest language, the word for the specific beauty of a thing that does not know how beautiful it is. Dana stayed on the Velarath vessel for 14 days in total. On the last day, she and OSS sat together in the chamber where Dana had spent most of her time. The Velta floor, the warm complex light, the pulse coming up through the palms. They had stopped needing the floor to translate most things. Not because Dana had learned Velarath or because OSS had learned English, but because in 14 days of sustained, honest, curious conversation, they had built a third thing between them. A shared grammar, improvised and imperfect and entirely theirs. You're going to be in so much trouble, Dana said. OSS's nodes did the thing Dana had come to recognize as laughter. A rapid, irregular flickering, too fast and too irregular to be communication. Yes. Extensively. Worth it. Entirely. Dana smiled. She looked at her hands, both of them palm up, the way she'd found herself holding them over the last few days. Open. The way OSS had offered her limb on the first day. The way Callie drew in every picture. I have to go back, she said. We know. The polymer sheeting in my cargo hold is 11 days late. We know. My sister is probably. We know. We have been monitoring your communication channels. Your sister has filed a standard delayed transit report. Your daughter as well. She received your transmission. She sent a response. Dana hadn't known a response had arrived. She felt something shift in her chest. Can I? The Velta floor projected the message. Callie's voice, 11 years old and slightly breathless the way she always was, as though words couldn't come out fast enough. Mom. Oh my gosh, Mom. You sounded so calm. Are you okay? Where are you? You said you found something and I've been thinking about it so much, and last night I had a dream. I know dreams are just dreams, but it felt really real, and there was a sound in the dream like the whole sky was breathing, and it felt like, Mom, it felt like when you used to sit with me when I was sick. Like something that just stayed. It felt like it was really glad I was here. Is that weird? I think that's weird. Also, I learned the bridge of the song. It still sounds bad. I love you more than space, which is saying something because you always say that. I know. Come home. Okay. Come home when you can. I'll be here. Dana sat with that for a while. She didn't try to speak. She just let it exist in the room the way you let a piece of music exist, without doing anything with it. Just being glad that it was. The pulse ran up through her palms. Under it, that other thing. Deep and patient and old as the ground under every ground. She felt it notice her noticing it. Glad, it said. Not in words. No. When Dana walked back through the knot door and across the empty space to her ship, OSS was at the hull opening. Dana turned back and looked at her across the 30 meters of black between them. She pressed her palm flat against the outside of her ship, the cold metal hull familiar as her own skin after 17 years. OSS, visible only as a shape in the opening of the vast geological vessel, held up her limb. Open. Dana raised her hand. Open. She went inside, sealed the door, ran her pre-flight, and pushed her ship away into the dark. The polymer sheeting was 14 days late. There would be paperwork. Her sister would have approximately 900 questions. The world she was returning to was exactly the same world she'd left. Same stations, same routes, same broken secondary heating coil she really did need to fix. And the world she was returning to was irrevocably different in a way she had no framework for yet. She had time to build one. She had, barring misfortune, several more decades of breathing. The conversation she'd started would continue, not just with the Velarath, not just with the Galactic Network, but with Callie, who had dreamed of a sky breathing and recognized it as something that stayed. With her sister. With whoever came after her, which would be everyone, eventually. Dana thought, HFY. The phrase had a particular meaning for her now. From this moment it is different. Not broken. Not lost. Just changed in a way that couldn't be unchanged and didn't need to be. She set her heading. Around her, in every direction, in every gap between every piece of matter in the enormous patient dark, something ancient and gladful and uncarrowable traveled with her. It had always been there. She had simply, finally, been still enough to feel it. Caro, the old Velarath word. The moment you understand something you already knew. Asterisk. HFY, the moment after. Asterisk. The moment you carry it forward. And